Here's a simple video to show you how we can create a Next browser within Grid. If you don't know Next, we can actually run this command to get the specification. So without going necessarily in the details, I think just this command by itself can serve as a good way to understand how the protocol works. We're making a netcat request, so TCP request to the host nightfall.city on port 1900. And we're passing this path. And this is basically what Next is. It takes a path, it takes a host. As long as it's on port 1900, it's going to return a response and close the connection. And this is the actual response. So the question now becomes, how can we integrate within Grid a way to simply browse Next documents? What I'd like to do is, whenever we have a window that has a path, let's say nightfall.city, or in this case, this is a URL, I would love to have a word that's Next and right-click on it, send the request to the server, and then insert within the body of the window the content of the response. So how could we do that? First, we need to create this next word. So let's do it. We have a next word. What we want to do is go within the title. We want to go at the top, and then we want to start to select the first word. For that, we use mark, word end to get to the end of the first word. Point works with mark and finishes the selection. Then we want to snip, which is going to push an address of a string from the highlight. So we're going to have this highlighted, and then snip is going to push the address of this string. Now we're going to unselect because we don't need the title to be selected. Then we're going to get back to the body, and then we can empty the body. And then at this point, we'll need to create some other words that we don't have right now. But what I'll do now is simply something like insert so we can start to visualize. All right, so let me actually execute this and let's test it. So at this point, we could have something, any title, but let's say nightfall.city. If I now click on Next, we have nightfall.city here. And that's because snip has pushed the address of the string, and then we've inserted the string within the body. Great, but this is obviously not enough. What we need to do now is to send this to some sort of netcat command that we don't have yet. And the thing is, we actually need to break it down in two parts. So we need the host name, but we also need the path, because the URL could be something like foo/bar. So how can we do that? Well, the first thing we could do is to actually create a word which is going to take your URL and break it down in parts. Let's call it part. Takes a URL and it returns a host and a path. The way we would call it would be something like that. Nightfall City, foo, bar, and then we'd say part, right? And this is going to give us host and path. To actually build it, we first need to create some sort of buffer. Let's give it 1024 cells, and we call it URL. Right, so what we're gonna do within part is we will copy the URL that we've got given that's on the stack. We will copy it to the URL buffer. Now that we have it copied, we're going to scan starting from the beginning of the string for a character which is a slash. And then this is going to be scanned on URL, and we want to get the index of this character. Now we're going to push this to the I register because we're going to use it a bit later. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set to 0 this cell that contains the slash. And we're doing it like that. Great. Now at this point, we've got almost everything. We're just going to return or push on the stack the address of the URL buffer and then the address of the character that is just after the slash. So it's URL I1++. I think this should be working, but we'll we'll actually test it. So let's execute this. Let's execute that. Let me just, yeah, okay. We have these. Now let's see what happens if I run this. Now I'm going to print the content of the stack, and if everything works, we have actually 2 addresses. And then if we print them, we should have foobar and then Nightfall City. So now this is working. We can move to the next step. And this last step is actually to create a command that is going to allow us to perform this netcat request. So let's do it. We're going to call it NC, and it takes a host, a path, and it's going to return a file descriptor, a string, if you will. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to push the host, and then this is the command that we want to run. So we want to run netcat. This is going to be the host 1900, and then we want to actually push that in a new buffer that I haven't created yet. It's going to be called host, and we're going to print this string. This is going to be substituted within the host. So it's also going to have 1024 cells. Call it host. Now that we've done that, we're actually going to open this process that we have right here, and it's going to push on the stack the input string and the output string. Now we're going to take this path that has been pushed on the stack, and we're going to write it on the input string and then add a new line at the end. Now that we've done it, we're going to close the input stream and push on the stack the output stream. All right, cool. So let's actually execute this, starting by pushing the buffer and then the NC command. Right, cool. So I think we're in a good spot, but right here, we'll need to modify this next function so that after we empty the body, we separate this URL that we have in 2 parts, and then we pass it over to NC. We receive so that we can get the text, and we insert it within the body of the window. So let's see how it's going to work. So I'm executing next, and then from here, if I just make Nightfall City and right click for next, it is actually working. So here we're having we're having Nightfall City. Now I can copy this, put it here, right click, and then there we go, writer's lane. So yeah, there it is. Hope that was helpful. And hope you've learned a thing or two. Thank you for watching.